today's little talk's going to be basically a Ben Franklin talk. You know that famous saying, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'm going to be talking to you today about a lot of prevention, but just keep in mind, in the background, silently, there is this dark cloud, right? It's called the cure, right? The cure is really expensive. And when we talk about things that you should do, the not doing part is the really expensive part. And you see, that's where I, as a business attorney, make a lot of money. It's because people don't do the right thing in setting up or operating their businesses that causes these problems that show up at my doorstep. And when people ask me, can you please resolve these, right? I have to say, sure, I can try, but it's going to cost a lot of money. And let me give you one example. Anybody here ever had a friend or an acquaintance who said, I'm 50-50 partners with somebody, right? They are going to pay for my retirement. Why? Because 50-50 partnerships never ever work. Not ever. That's just the truth. And so sooner or later, they're going to be at my doorstep saying, I would like to kill my partner with my bare hands. And you go, no, you can't do that. You'll go to jail, and that's a referral for Kim.
Somehow let Tim win.
And those aren't the kind of referrals I'd like to send to Kim, because those aren't winning referrals. Those are really going to be bad. So what you have to do is you have to try to sort those things out. And when people hate each other that much, it's really, really difficult. And guess what? It's really, really expensive. And you have to bring all of your skills to bear, not just the legal and the business, but also the psychological, because most of the time you're playing psychologist as well. Because it's a very, very stressful situation. So we'll talk about why we do the things that we do. And if you go to this little handout that I gave you, which talks about flat fees, we talk about the great things you need to do. And these great things are, if you're going to set up a business and you're going to be serious about it, if you're not incorporated or operating through an LLC, you just are not doing the right thing. Why? Because there's so much risk involved. How many people have a house, right? How many people want to keep their house? Okay, so if you're doing business as a sole proprietor and you're making any sort of money, you better be incorporated or operating as an LLC, because there's no sense in putting your house at risk, is there? No, there's not. But people do it all the time. And what's the argument for not incorporating or not operating through an entity? Oh, it's just easier that way with less paperwork, and I don't want to give those bastards at the Secretary of State or the Franchise Tax Board the $800 every year. That has got to be the stupidest explanation I've ever heard in my life. Do you realize you're putting every asset you own on the block by not incorporating or operating through an entity? How expensive is that going to be? That's going to be really bad. You know what filing bankruptcy does to you? It's awful. It's awful. It sometimes destroys people, literally. So you don't have to do that. So $800 a year sending it to the Franchise Tax Board, that's cheap insurance. Why? Because it protects your personal stuff and your family and you. And it gives you peace of mind. And it's pretty cheap. That's why we do it on a flat fee basis. Okay? What's another way you can protect yourself? You can have proper contracts, proper invoices, proper work orders, proper estimates. You know, how many contractors do we have in the room? Yay. Lots of contractors, right? If you don't have proper contracts, you're asking for it in the state of California. How many people have employees? Yeah, people have employees. How many people think it's smarter to be using independent contractors? That's a really dumb idea. Why? Because you're usually going to be deemed an employee anyway when they wake up one morning and decide they don't like you. To really do it right, if you're going to have a real independent contractor relationship, I have a 12-page agreement that lines out everything. If you use that agreement, you have a better than average chance of basically escaping what they call a labor and wage claim. Other than that, right, you have real problems, because if somebody wakes up and says, no, I'm not an independent contractor, I'm your employee, you've got big problems. Big problems. And by the way, if you're operating as a sole proprietorship, you're personally liable for all the labor and wage claim. Penalties, interest, damages, all that sort of thing. So essentially, you have to start thinking about how do I arrange my business in the proper way. You have to incorporate, you have to have contracts. How many people either have partners, right? We call partners or co-shareholders, right? Or know people who have them, right? Right? Do these people have what they call a buy-sell agreement, right? Do you know what a buy-sell agreement is? It's basically the agreement that says, this is what happened if everything bad that we can imagine happens. Right? We plan for this. Now, entrepreneurs are awful at this because they think nothing bad is ever going to happen. They think everything's going to be peachy and keen. They're just delusional, right? No, entrepreneurs are delusional. We love them. We love them because they're just great visionaries and they have the greatest optimism in the world, but they're delusional. What they need to do is sit down and say, if this all goes to hell in a handbasket, this is what we're going to do. Why? Let's give an example. Let's say Dennis and Chris are partners, right? And both Dennis and Chris are married, right? And basically, we say, look, Dennis, you really like Chris, don't you? He's a great partner. He goes, yeah, he's wonderful. And Chris, same for Dennis, right? Yep. And then I say, Chris, guess what? Dennis just died. And he goes, oh, that's horrible. He says, no, it's worse than that. Why? Well, why, Chris? Because Dennis's wife is now your partner. She owns half your business. Isn't that exciting? And Chris goes, where the hell is that buy-sell agreement? We're going to get that thing signed today. But wait, there's more, right? Because you see, even if you have the buy-sell agreement, if you don't fund it by getting life insurance, right? Life insurance, right? You got to see your life insurance agent because for what they call key person insurance, right? You have to fund it. Now, why do you do that? Because let's say Dennis dies, his wife's there saying, I'd like my money, please, right, for half of the business. And you say, we don't have that kind of money to give you right now, dear. And so essentially, you have to have a mechanism in place to take care of that. You can do it contractually. Well, we'll pay you so much over time, over so many years with so much interest. Or we could have a life insurance policy in place that basically takes care of that and takes care of it from both sides, or all three sides, or all four sides, or all 20 sides if you want to do that. What's really important is that you plan for this stuff and have it in place in case the bad stuff happens, right? Now, the best part of this is really cool because you see, when we finally get these people to sit down and do a buy-sell agreement, in every agreement it says, you will agree to coordinate this with your will and trust. And then there are crickets. Because everybody goes, what? Oh, you got to have one of those? It's like, well, you don't have to have one, but it's a really good idea. And they go, oh, okay, so what do we got to do? And so you basically have to set up a will and trust for these people. And of course, that involves more insurance. That involves investment people like the buds, right? And you have to bring more insurance people to insure the stuff, right? And so everybody gets involved, hopefully the CPAs, right, to make sure all of this stuff happens. And then you realize, wow, this is a cool way to set things up. Now, how much money do you think I make out of my practice from this type of transactional work? It's about 10% of my practice. It doesn't make me much money at all. Now we're talking about the cure, right? That dark shadow lurking in the back, right? That's where I make all my money, ladies and gentlemen. It's because I have to cure all these messes. And when I do, it's just unbelievably expensive. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes to do that. So when you talk about, oh, this little ounce of prevention, sending $800 to those people at the state, right? That's nothing, right? If you're faced with what you have to do later to fix these types of problems, it's overwhelming. That minimal amount that you're throwing or investing to make this thing set up right or be set up right is nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands of dollars you're going to spend trying to fix it later. And so if you want to keep me poor, then do what I ask. Follow my little flat fee, schedule, do those types of things, get set up right, and I won't make much money at all. But if you don't, then you're going to show up someday and say, I need you to fix this. And when I tell you I'm going to need a $10,000 retainer deposit and I'm going to start billing hourly, and I might do that every month for about the next year and a half, then you're not going to be happy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the cure you don't want. Yes, sir?
So why would an incorporation be less than an LLC?
Why would it be?
Yeah, cost-wise, flat fee-wise.
Oh, because usually an LLC has an operating agreement, and incorporated into the operating agreement is a buy-sell agreement. And it's a very long document, whereas a corporation doesn't have that. You have to do that separately. You have to say, oh, I guess we need one of those too, so we'll set up a separate agreement. Whereas the LLC, when you have 2 or more people, you basically put it all together in one package.
So if you have real estate, would you recommend like putting?
I think the CPAs usually recommend that, yes, LLC. Notice I just said the CPAs recommend.
Not everything, put them in separate ones, otherwise.
Yes.
Resident A can sue building B.
Yeah, every CPA I've ever worked with has made that recommendation, and I have made that recommendation. Probably my most famous case ever was a guy from Cuba who showed up, started as a dishwasher, and when he finally showed up at my doorstep, he had 53 rental properties, all in his name. Yes, and I had a real estate broker friend of mine who was on his knees begging, almost crying, saying, you have to let him do this, right? Set them up in separate LLCs, have them all held by a holding company, right? And he thought I was ripping him off, right? That this was a horrible rip-off, that this was just a waste. Until 2 years later, a meth lab blew up in one of his rental properties. And we had to bankrupt, right, that LLC. But he showed up in my office with a box of Cuban cigars. I don't know how they got there. And I said, what's this for? He goes, I still have 52 rental properties. Thank you. Because bad stuff happens. It really does.
The life insurance for the buy-sell.
Yes.
How complicated does that get when the value of the company is fluctuating?
It has nothing to do with the value of the company.
But isn't it supposed to buy out the other?
No, it has to do with what you guesstimate, right, is the value of that person's share in the company.
But 8 years later, that value could be tripled.
Well, then you might, at some point.
You have to keep adjusting the life.
No, you don't have to keep adjusting it. You just said that it went up dramatically, right?
Well, but over 8, 10
Well,
years.
okay, let's put your OCD aside for a minute, right? And just say, we'll check in every 5 years and see what happened to the value of the company, right? If it goes up dramatically, then you might want to make a change. But you see, we don't leave you with just insurance. We also have a contract that says you also have the option of paying them off over time. So you're not left basically out there exposed, right? You might have to pay something over time if the company dramatically increased in value and you didn't do anything about the insurance, right? But you see, if you look at it every 5 years or so, periodically, just to make sure that you're not in a position where your insurance doesn't even come close to covering what your possible exposure is, then I think you'll be okay. Right? Because, as you said, right, if the company increases dramatically, you're going to want to cover that, right? Because you don't want to have to pay money out of the company. But, you know, stuff happens. Let's say, basically, today you're a $2 million company, and then in 2 years, all of a sudden, you're a $10 million company. And you're so busy making money, you forgot about the life insurance. And then, of course, your partner dropped dead. We're not going to leave you exposed contractually, right? You may not have enough insurance to cover all of that, but you can cover the rest of it, basically, by paying it out over time. You see, but the main thing is you at least have a plan in place. That's what I always tell people is at least get the plan in place. You can always make adjustments. You can also backfill and fix things, right? But not having a plan, as you just point out, is a disaster, right? Not having any insurance is just a disaster if you went from 2 to 10, right? Because if you have to pay out $5 million and you have no insurance for any of that, that's just, where are you going to get that? And you see, that's what I'm advocating for, at least getting something in place. Because let's say, for instance, you only had $2 million of insurance in place and you have to pay $3 million. That's not as bad as having to pay out 5.
Yeah.
You see my point?
Yeah.
Okay. I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much, guys.